Hey everybody, this is Marina, your podcast host at Unbossed. Here we go. At Unbossed, I interview amazing women in underrepresented fields. There is so much woman power in the world that I want to provide these women a platform to tell their story. Please connect with us at www.unbossed.io and please consider supporting by sharing, liking, and commenting the podcast. Tell all your Netflix friends and family about it. Submit a recommendation for our guest. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app and YouTube. Donate by clicking on the anchor link and help me continue to deliver your content. I hope you enjoy and welcome to the show. Dr. Kathleen S. Caliento has spent 2 decades committed to urban education, student success, and dismantling social injustice. As president and CEO of Cara Collective, she leads a social purpose enterprise with 30 years of experience helping people affected by poverty to get and keep quality employment. Further, Cara Collective works with employers and organizations across the nation to create more equitable workforce solutions and build a more inclusive economy for all. Through its 4 entities, Cara Collective produces nearly 1,000 jobs each year at retention rates more than 20 points higher than the national norms. Before joining Cara Collective, Caliento was a Chief Learning and Design Officer at the Academy Group, where she worked to help people rise above the effects of poverty while demonstrating a professional commitment to access and equity. Prior to the Academy Group, she held several leadership positions at Spark, including Executive Director of Spark Chicago. A published author, Caliento earned her Master of Arts in Secondary Science and her Doctor of Philosophy in Science Education from Columbia University. Caliento serves on the board of Adler University, 826 Chi, and Leadership Greater Chicago LFA Board. Additionally, she attended the Civic Leadership Academy at the University of Chicago, and she's a fellow of the 2020 class of Leadership Greater Chicago. Welcome, Kathleen. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Unbossed podcast. I'm Marina, your host, and today I have a special guest. Her name is Kathleen St. Louis Caliento. She is president and CEO of Cara Collective. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Marina. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you so much. And as neighbors, I'm half Dominican. You're from Haiti. We have that same, technically we kind of most people locally will tell us that we're not necessarily friendly, but I consider my neighbors as being friendly. And so I love the fact that you're from our island, our collective Hispaniola Island. Or do you have a name for the island in Haiti?
Hispaniola
Island, right? Okay, perfect. Yeah. So our collective Hispaniola Island, and we've both come to the U.S. Similarly. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And let's start with talking about, obviously, you. Tell us, how was it growing up in Haiti, and how did you end up coming to the States?
Yes, and so just to clarify, I was actually born here. So we are first generation.
Born here. Perfect.
Yes, and by here I mean New York City.
Yeah.
But my parents, we were surrounded by all of our relatives who were all from Haiti.
Yeah.
So it was, growing up in the Haitian culture was absolutely incredible. It's as you know, we are a very vibrant, colorful people who love music, who love food, who think about community. It's like, everybody is an aunt and uncle, a cousin, whether they're biologically related to you or not. And so, that idea of community is just so beautiful to me, and something that I always seek in friendships and in other relationships, whether that's professional or friendship, and particularly in other friend circles, we search for the same kinds of feelings that you got when you connect with family members or long lost family friends that you haven't connected with. So it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And Haitians are incredible. They're resilient. It was the first country, as you know, to win their independence.
Yes.
Definitely incredible and immense amounts of struggle along the way, from natural disasters to political challenges.
Yes.
It, and catastrophes, exactly, but they have found a way to persist and carry on and show resolve and strength. So it's an incredible country and people to be associated with, I believe.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm looking at you now on video, and I'm thinking, oh my God, you're so beautiful. And I don't know, I can just, like, it reminds me of home so much. And I wonder, when you were growing up in New York City and being Haitian, did you feel any different from your African American community, being a fourth generation Asian person of color in New York City, right? How was that experience for you?
That is such a fantastic question for a number of reasons. Number one, I appreciate just the fact that you are raising the level of variation between people that might seemingly look the same. Right?
Yeah.
And so because I share a similar skin color with someone doesn't necessarily mean that all of our experiences are the same. And I think there's an assumption on that. So I appreciate you asking that question. And truth be told, it's an interesting dichotomy, right? Because there have been times in my life where I have connected more with folks from an immigrant population or an immigrant community, or that share that first generation status, whether that be from African countries or Latin American countries or Asian countries, than I do sometimes with folks who have generations of family who have been in the United States. And so, I learned about some of the traditions of my African American friends that I didn't know, because I knew the traditions of my Haitian friends and my Haitian family and my immigrant families, which were sometimes very similar, right? In terms of the type of education they wanted for you, the types of, just kind of funny things that your parents expect and believe and say that just somebody from the United States would not understand, and they didn't have an immediate immigrant family that they wouldn't necessarily relate to. So it's been mixed, right? And I definitely continue to find my own way, but I think that I am so appreciative of varying experiences, just knowing that I want people to appreciate my varied experience, and that while I am a first generation Black Haitian American woman, there are some similarities and some differences with Black African Americans who have been in the country for generations.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a topic that I like to highlight because it speaks to the intersectionality even of people of color in America. While we're grouped, potentially in 1 to 2 categories, we are very diverse depending on our various experiences and how we've come to be where we are today. And moving into something maybe a little bit more personal and fun, like, who was Kathleen growing up as a little girl? What were you doing? What was your thing?
Gosh, it is so funny. I am I'm so gregarious and outgoing. Like, it's a joke. Like, I mean, I could talk to a wall, and I have conversations with people at places. They're like, no one's ever asked me that. I'm like, I know, because I'm curious. I'm interested, But I think growing up, there was definitely a little bit of awkwardness, right? And
I see it.
I was in New York. Yeah, and I'm tall, which most people, especially now in Zoom land, when people meet me in person, they're like, "Whoa,
you're so tall."
Yes, and so people don't know that until they meet me, and so that's always just an interesting. So it's a very lanky, always the tallest kid, and then of course, from a gender perspective, but back then being the tallest girl, it was just awkward, right? Trying to find your place. After my parents divorced, my mom and the kids, we moved to Southern California, and the area that we moved to was predominantly white. My mom remarried my stepdad, who is white, and it was a little bit tough, right? Because from an identity perspective, I was trying to find, and those were more of my formative years too. And when you're socially aware, junior high school, it's just like it's tough. So I think when I was in New York City and surrounded by my Haitian community and feeling kind of comfortable in that environment, there was much more confidence, I think,
Mm,
there. And then when I moved to Southern California, where I was more of the other,
mm,
that was a little bit tougher, right?
yeah.
But still was fun, curious. I read a lot. I would get in trouble for falling asleep with the light on because I wasn't reading. Always active, from everything from dance to track to soccer, as a kid, and volleyball as well. And so always been extremely, extremely active. Jokes were a big thing. I mean, the Bazooka Joke comics, I would always read them. I'd buy joke books and tell them at the dinner table all the time. Couldn't wait to get my hands on the Sunday Funnies, the comics.
That's-
And we worked hard. My mom for a while before she met my stepdad was a single mom, and we had chores and we had things to do, and she did everything to ensure that we grew up with those values and an understanding of what it means to support and help around the house, and providing that helping hand. So that's a little bit of an insight into who I was as a kid.
I love that. I love that. You also mentioned that a lot of people may have mistaken you for a basketball player. What a stereotype.
Yes, exactly. It's so funny. My big joke is when people say, "Oh, do you play basketball?" I say, "Oh no." Or, "Did you play basketball?" I say, "Oh no, I played the other tall sport, except for white people, volleyball." Because then people associate that because you're tall and black that you will play basketball, and I'm like, "Oh no, that." And I love that now. Of course, today you see the stereotypes breaking, and you see
Yeah.
incredible players across the spectrum and across the diversity spectrum in all sports, which is incredible. But I think at one time sports were pretty I'm stating the obvious here, but we're pretty narrow in terms of who was allowed access into particular types of sports. So
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And then, you got a exciting and super cool education back in New York. Went to Columbia University. Girl,
I did.
smart
I know,
girl.
right? It was one of those, uh, you know, that sort of the question about whether or not you can, it always is there
Mm,
as a person of color, because society has told you for so many time for so long that you can't, or because you don't see as many examples of people who look like you. And so
mm,
there's always the little tinge, and of course things that has changed dramatically, but there's still a lot of work to do. And I think, when I applied, I remember when I applied to undergraduate institutions, there was never a question or a suggestion or recommendation from any of my advisors that I even think about Ivy League institutions,
wow,
right? And
really?
so, yeah, no, not at all. And
So
even
how did that
it was
happen?
never like, hey, if you think about doing this, or maybe take this AP course because that would allow you to, right? And so none of that kind of guidance was
Yeah.
provided to me in any way, shape, or form. And I think once I knew how important education was to my family.
Mm,
My father had always had a very strong push on education. He used to say, "You're black, you're a woman, no one's going to respect you unless you have an education. That is two
wow.
strikes against you, and you have to come to the table with something to show people that just removes any questions from people, so you could actually start at somewhat of a level playing field, right?" And
Mm,
so for me, when I was thinking about grad schools, I was thinking about what are the best institutions out there. And I only applied to two,
yeah.
for grad school. And so got my doctorate in science education from Teachers College, Columbia University. So very,
Well,
very excited about that, and proud of that accomplishment.
I have to say I've had a similar experience to you growing up, where I was not necessarily guided towards a better, like that guidance that I also heard where people are like, oh no, my guidance counselor told me I could apply to this awesome university, could take these classes in order to make do that. I never got that advice, and I love your dad's insight. I love it. Did he tell you straight up like that? Like,
straight up. He said, "You're black. You're a woman.
How old were
That's
you?
two strikes against you." This was in high school. Because as I was thinking about colleges to apply to, etc., he was trying to push on what my major should be. He really wanted me to be a doctor. Again, that's a joke in the immigrant community. You can be three things: a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. Marina, you got one of them.
I actually inadvertently I did. It was not my intention.
Exactly. And my friends tease me because they're like, "Well, you are a doctor. You have your PhD."
True.
I'm like, yes. I think my father would have appreciated medical doctor, but we'll take that kind of doctor. Yeah. But I think that was just so important to him to kind of make sure that I wasn't naive about what I was going to face out there.
Yeah.
And, the truth is I'm similar with my daughter, who's only 6 years old, in a less harsh and less direct way of like, that's two strikes against you. And I think the way that I try to present it is actually that's two assets that you have going for you, right? Yeah. And I get my father's perspective because he was trying to say, listen, the world doesn't view those as assets typically. Right? Yeah. But I think switching the narrative is so important, right? Yeah. And I know you have daughters, and so thinking about, my daughter, it's like, what is the model that I want to present for her, and the lessons that I want her to understand. And it's right now, it's you can do hard things. Like, don't let people tell you that that's not possible for you, right? You can do hard things, and because you're, the whole joke is that you're a girl, you can do things even better than anybody else, right? Like, and so girl power, and trying to really empower her to see that as an asset. Yeah. Whereas I think my father was using it as a deficit, but using it to motivate.
Motivation. Yeah.
Exactly. It's using it as motivation from different perspectives. Yeah. But I think if we start to believe those as assets, then others will as well.
What do you think was his insight? Was this your bio father, or your biological father, or was your stepdad?
This was my biological father. He is a Black immigrant man. And so...
Straight talk.
Right. And so he has faced all of the things that you might imagine, in terms of discrimination. He himself is a physician today, but it was a very long uphill road. He went to medical school in the Dominican Republic and in Mexico, actually. And so he speaks Spanish fluently. He actually taught me how to salsa dance, all the things.
Wow.
Yes. And so... he faced a lot of discrimination, and a lot of work that, he drove cabs and taxis and sort of like those black cars, they call them in New York City, and worked as a security guard to kind of put himself through school. So there was a lot of that he was working on the sidelines to achieve his goals, and wasn't always necessarily valued. And then even when he did get his degree and passed his boards, like trying to find a place that would recognize and value his education, his experience, and his worldview was difficult as well. Excuse me, but he is he's shown that it is possible as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is so cool.
Yeah. And I would say similarly for my mother, right? She had to fight too, and she found herself in the health fields as well. So she's a nurse, retired today, and so enjoying the good life. She's worked very, very hard her entire life, but she had to push and fight to get to where she is today, even, to get her nursing degree and to get the jobs that she needed, et cetera, and to be respected and valued for who she was. So it's an incredible models that I have, for sure.
Absolutely. And yeah, absolutely. I think like immigrant parents are invincible sometimes because they're, I think one of the biggest misconception is that people want to leave their country of origin to come to America. And they do in part, but not because of the reason that most people think. Is not because America's just better. Is because the oppression and the hardships in the country of origin they're so hard that almost people have almost no choice but to leave their country.
Exactly. Exactly
And
right.
it's not necessarily about, like, people will love to leave and go back to their country. It's like, please, if it was a place where
Exactly.
I could live, I would,
Exactly.
right? And so I think, like, just like the fact that they would leave behind something that I think is so dear and near, and just like to make a better life, for an opportunity for us, for the children, and for themselves and for their future, is just amazing. So I'm super in awe always with immigrant parents and how they've done that.
Always, always.
Yeah.
I think that they deserve the highest honor, one of the highest honors, because there are lots of classifications,
Yeah.
of course, of people who are struggling. But I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, all the kind of sacrifice that you have to do, and oftentimes it's folks leaving on their own by themselves, and hoping that they can, and going to establish so that the others can come and follow, and it's difficult, it's
Yeah.
challenging, and so that's couldn't agree with you more that that's something that's difficult. And I think one of the things that they are trying to do is to also figure out how to your point, provide
Yeah.
a better opportunity, but then be realistic about how hard you have to work for that
Yeah.
opportunity. It's such a balance, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're coming and I'm sacrificing to do this for you, my children, but you've got to work twice, three times as hard to make sure that this was worth
Worth
the
it.
sacrifice.
Yeah. There's pressure for sure.
Exactly.
So is this part of, you think, what drove you to being in more of the social work type of career choice? And, if not, like, give me more color about what has been the motivator behind, is it like the overall industries is social work could it be classified as such?
Yeah, 100%.
Or,
I mean,
or public
I
service.
often
I think
exactly.
public service is,
And
yeah.
I lead with that often, is that, thinking about my parents, how hard they had to, and still have to, in the case of my father, have to work. And my mother too, even though she's retired, there's a lot that she still has to overcome from a social perspective. That drives, and thinking about the opportunities that they were excluded from, the access that they did not have, the resources and tools that were not provided, the inequity that was shown when working with them. These are 100% motivators for the work that I do. And I am motivated by the strategic urgency of wanting to help people transform their lives and continue to improve the way that they live and walk in our society. And I think it's just, for me, it's just as important to help change the structures and the systems around us that have allowed this to perpetuate for so long. When I think about the work that we do at Cara Collective with workforce development and how difficult our participants' lives have been.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes it's a misstep that they took in life. Sometimes there's misfortune from a financial perspective, and many times it's injustice that have landed them where they are. And what are we doing beyond helping our participants navigate the road up and out of poverty to help change that when they get out of that, or as they are on their road, that the environment around them is welcoming. And so those are tough conversations with community partners, with companies, with hiring institutions around us who are helping to change the narrative, but maybe not fully appreciating the context. And so helping folks really understand that is key. So that's a big part of the work that we do too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even like now, it's even sometimes hard for me to talk about these things because there is the like victim sensationalism that we're trying to avoid, right? We're like, we don't want to always talk about them as being victim of or something, or poor, blah blah blah, them, or whatever that is. We want to be able to empower people that have misstepped. We all misstep. right? We all make mistakes. We want to empower people that have made mistakes to move forward and have a better life. So what are the systems that we're going to put in place for that? And I wonder, like, have you, with Cara Collective, have you noticed, like, there seems to be a somewhat unforgiving, general system in place. What are maybe some of the things that you're most excited about that are driving those systemic changes that you want to see, whether it's at Cara or whether it's within your professional role right now?
Absolutely. So, that we're having the conversation about inclusive employment. So, right. So that's just the fact that we're having that conversation, recognizing that there have been inequities and naming it, because that's the first part to determining how to solve the challenge. So I think that that's huge. But secondarily, I would say the fact that folks are starting to think beyond hiring, right? So hiring is just the tip of the iceberg. And I am so appreciative of organizations that are doing incredible hiring initiatives. I think about BMO Harris, Aon, Chase, JP Morgan Chase, the CTA here in Chicago. There are great organizations that are thinking about how to open their doors to allow more inclusivity in their employment hiring practices.
Specifically, tell me about that. Is it more inclusive as in diversifying it, or even going beyond and talking about, like, what do you do with a person that may have a record, or tell me about that part.
And so there's a I would say a couple of things. So one, from the hiring perspective, there are a number of hurdles that we need to overcome, right? And so from that perspective, they're thinking about, let's review what our job description looks like. Does this role actually need a bachelor's degree? Because the research shows us, right? Like, upwards of 50-60% of the population of Black and Latino and Latina applicants are excluded when you include a bachelor requirement. And so, does this actually require a bachelor's degree? So, having folks look at those the qualifications. Secondarily, I would say it's what you mentioned, right? What are our policies around folks who have had impact or been impacted by the justice system? Can we look at how old that record is, what level that is? Can we look at perhaps if this has been past a certain number of years in this applicant's life, that they would be still allowed to apply for that role? And so thinking through what that looks like, and we work with great organizations like Cabrini Green Legal Aid to help us think through what that looks like. But then once an applicant passes those hurdles, so that already is a hurdle, right? That's just hiring, getting your foot in the door. Then to your earlier question, I think that the other piece is, what does that environment look like once an employee is in there, right?
Totally.
What do the development opportunities look like? What do the advancement opportunities look like? Is your place of employment one that is fully culturally competent and inclusive of folks that come from differing backgrounds? Is it truly one where folks feel like they will belong? Like, that's what I mean by being inclusive, right? Yeah. And so thinking through how to help organizations think through their internal HR practices, development and advancement, professional development opportunities, providing feedback and support, but also being flexible for folks who might have different backgrounds. What does that look like? And so one of the things that we do at Cara Collective, with specifically our arm called Cara Plus, is that we help organizations figure this out, right? We talk about inclusive employment and thinking through, and so we have cohort-based groups where they can work through in our action labs, where they're working with other peers in similar organizations to say, how are you working through this problem to think through addressing inclusive employment beyond hiring? And so that has been, we started with, I think, two companies in our portfolio a year or two ago, and now we're upwards of 20. So it's really exciting. Folks are really clamoring at the bit to understand the ways in which they can do that. Because I think, there's a will out there. There's, in many organizations, I truly believe that they want to figure out how to do inclusive hiring, inclusive employment in a much more just way, an equitable way. I think what they lack is the way. And so that is a lot of, I know, Cara Plus, our Cara Collective does that, and there are other organizations as well. But that is something to me that is so important is, not just, and that's part of sort of helping the systemic challenge and the systemic issue.
I love that. I love it because it comes from empowering versus just handing out.
Exactly.
And it is about making people feel like human, not like donations cases.
Exactly.
And so I really like that. Is there anything else about at Cara Collective that has been maybe happening right now that you want to highlight, or another project that you're excited to talk about that has happened recently?
Sure. So, I'm just so excited about the work that all of our entities are doing. With our program, we're redefining ways and to think about how to reach more participants. So, we're rolling out a new hybrid program model so that more of our participants can join in different ways.
Nice.
There will still be required in-person training sessions, etc. But thinking about how do we make this flexible in a way that allows and values that folks have lives that they're also trying to live.
Totally.
And so that program is really incredible and exciting. Our Clean Slate program that continues to employ transitional workers and employees who, by the way, never stopped working throughout the pandemic. They've been incredible. They are folks who are keeping our communities clean, helping to keep, in some areas, our communities safe.
Yes.
And it's really incredible to have those. Our staffing company, mission-based staffing company, Cara Connects, has been providing folks who have lost employment with temporary opportunities. So we've been doing some incredible work there. But then also thinking about, and I mentioned the work of Cara Plus, but I think one of the things that we're super excited about is how do we continue to increase the opportunities for our participants. You already heard me talk about this idea of access and opportunity. And so ensuring that our participants have pathways of career opportunities that they might be excited about. And are we partnering with the right folks or building the right programs internally to ensure that our participants have those? I think that there's something inherent in that, which is dignity, right? It's not just, you should be lucky that I'm going to give you this job. But no, you also have the agency to say, here's what I desire to do. And is there an opportunity for me to do that? Can you help me achieve that? And that is something that is so fundamental to the work that we do at Cara Collective that I would love to see that manifest even more and in different ways.
I really like that. After you said dignity, also it came to mind like the word agency, like giving them their own agency to choose instead of, again, feeling like they just not have one option and, have a multitude of things that they could go after. That's really cool.
Exactly.
So how is it being a president and CEO of a organization? Cara Collective has been around since 1991.
Yes. 30 years.
Yeah.
30 plus years.
I was doing some type of math because I was born in 88. Oops, I disclosed my age, but I was born in, so it's like it's almost as old as I am. You all have created almost 13,000 jobs since then. There's so much money that this folks have made thanks to you, and then the job opportunity that you have created. You manage a fund, is a nonprofit organization. What does it mean to be a CEO and president of this company?
It's first of all, I'll say, and as I continue saying, this is not lip service. It's an incredible honor, right? For an organization that has been around for 30 years, that has such a strong history in Chicago and nationally, to be entrusted to lead this organization to the next phase is a huge honor. And so that is just incredible and amazing. It's also validating, right? From your experience, my worldview, the impact that I have had in my previous career, in my previous roles, the leadership that I've exhibited, the impact that I've been able to make, the connections that I've been able to make, the strategic thinking that I bring to this work is being valued and saying, this is what we need in this organization now.
Nice.
And so that's an incredible thing. And I think, again, how important it is. My daughter, I think it is one of the funniest and one of the most heartwarming things that she does is she's very imaginative and creative personality. So she has lots of kind of imaginating role playing. She loves to role play, right? And I mean, it has been, okay, mommy, I'm going to be the CEO and you're going to be my assistant. Okay? Like that is how she role plays. And I love that my little, Black daughter, 6-year-old, is role playing as a CEO. And she has to go get dressed for the role, by the way. So she puts on her little collared shirt. She has on a pair of heels. She sometimes asks if I can put some makeup on her. And she has her bag, and she'll ask you for your business card if you walk into her office, And so, but the idea is, to your point of, it's just an incredible role model to set for as a mirror, right? When a young girl, a young person can look and say, there is someone who looks like me that is in this role. That is something that I can do. And, I love that it starts as closely as home, and I can only hope that it expands beyond. That's the great stuff, right? And then there's the challenging stuff. It's lonely on top, Marina. It's lonely on top. And we were chatting a little bit before, but it's all of it's never, you're never off, right?
Yeah.
When you have the kind of role that is this important, there's never kind of, oh, my hours are between 9 and 5. That does not exist, and so while at the same time, I want to, of course, model work-life balance. And so there's a lot that I do to try to, anyway, maybe not as successfully if you speak to members of my team, but where I try to shield some of the longer nights, turmoil, anxiety, things that are going on, and moving towards that. We've got this. We're a strong organization. We're a strong organization because of you all. I've got this because you've got this. So let's move forward, right? Let's figure out the decisions that we need to make. Let's get the important pieces of information that are going to inform that decision. It might not be the right decision, but let's fail fast, right? And so let's try to keep moving. And so that's, I think, really, really been the thing. And I try to lead with values too, right? That's so important. This idea of being warm and demanding is something that is so important to me. I want to be somebody that is approachable, that you can relate to, that you can have a conversation with, that maybe you want to go out and have a drink with, but I want to be somebody that cares enough about you to give you the tough feedback as well. And I want people to hold me to that if I'm not doing that enough, so that's really huge. And I think trying to be as clear about what it is that we're trying to achieve as an organization together, goals, clarity around those goals and around that vision is also important.
Oh my God. That is such an amazing bunch of content you gave me. It was great because my next question was what is your leadership style? And I was you already answered that. So I heard so many things. I heard you have a sense of responsibility for your organization, which sounds really cool. You want to trace the line between being there for your team and your company, and also being there for your family and your personal life and yourself. So making sure that you have that balance and you mirror that, and you're an exemplary leader, you lead by example. And the last thing I heard was about making sure that you're approachable, but you also you can be trustworthy, and also giving that tough feedback. And all of that, plus being a woman, and plus being a woman of color. Are we? Are we in the I want it all mood right now? I want it all.
Exactly.
I want it all.
Exactly.
So, did you think you were ever like growing up in your career as a young woman? Do you think this is where you were gonna end up?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I thought that, what I wanted to be when I was really young was a child psychologist. I don't know why. I remember being very vividly thinking about being in a school where I had my office and like envisioning a very warm office where kids could come in and talk to me about their problems or things that they
Wow.
were worried about. And
It's kind of like the
I
job
did
you have
end up.
now.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because I did end up studying psychology and biology, and in college. But I think that the yearning there was wanting to be able to talk to people and help them
Mm,
figure out how to rise above wherever it is that that if they had a struggle, that could be seen as somebody that they could go to help figure out how to solve that problem. And so, yeah, I think you can extrapolate that to say this is sort of as I think about the work that I've done, whether it's around education or whether it's around workforce, that it's really about what are the problems that we're trying to solve here, whether they're individual or systemic, right? And so I
yeah.
think that there is, if folks would allow me that grace, I think there is an extrapolation that you could make there about really what that was, that deep seated desire included. And so that's kind of what I thought. And then I think even as I started went to college and even grad school, I think I thought I was going to be a teacher, and that was going to be, and that, which is a noble profession. Uh, and I think that that's where I thought that was going to go.
Mm,
And so and noble and difficult. I want to make sure that I'm saying all the right things there and not just saying the right things, but I do believe that. I
yeah.
know how difficult it is to be an educator in today's society, especially over the last couple of years. I think people's respect for education and those leading our education system has definitely
Increased.
shifted over the last couple of years. Yes, in a positive direction because of what folks had to do once the pandemic hit. But yeah, so I never really truly imagined myself in the role of, president and CEO. But again, as I think about sort of the trajectory of my life and the continued increasing leadership roles that I've taken on to try to tackle these problems at an increasing scale, it makes sense that I've ended up here.
Totally. Yeah. If you were looking back in your career and maybe let's do this quickly. Maybe give us, the audience a little bit of like a highlight of some of the key major position that you've held, and then I will like as you think back through that, maybe a couple of advice that you'll give your younger self about going through that and coming to where you're now.
Yeah. So some key milestones. I would say, going to um, working at McKinsey before grad school was a key milestone.
Mm,
And the reason that was a key milestone is that I made connections and networks there that even when I went to grad school for education, completely opened up my mind to the ways that I might use the skill sets that I have. And
mm-hmm.
so, number one, it was someone that I worked with at McKinsey who even gave me the idea of, as I was trying to figure out what the next step was professionally for me, of grad school in education.
Mm,
And the more that I thought about it, the more that it made sense. And particularly, I love science. I didn't want to be a doctor, but I did love science. So that just made sense to me. And so, and was exciting to me. And so, as I did that, then it sort of circled back around to what, again, while I had initially thought that teaching was going to be sort of my world and the way that I was going to make an impact, once I entered in the world of education at the graduate level and connected to folks that I had been working with at McKinsey, I realized that I was thinking way too narrowly about how I might impact in that sector.
got it.
And so there were opportunities beyond school and formal education that I might be able to provide impact. And so that's what led me to down the broader road of nonprofit world, but specifically around education. I would say that another key milestone was, and back then I think is, well, let me go to the second key milestone first. So then I think that the next key milestone was working at a venture philanthropy called the Chicago Public Education Fund. And a venture philanthropy is essentially a venture capital, but for social return, right? And there, what I engaged with for the first time in a really substantive way was the marrying of the nonprofit space with the for-profit space, and understanding how strong collaborations between the two could help change systems. And so that was really where I saw the role and the impact of the business community on, particularly in this case, education and in specifically. It was just remarkable to see. And so for me, that was just oh wow, okay,
Spark.
This is how real systems change happens. Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah, and then I would say that the next big milestone for me was when I became the executive director of Spark. And that to me was my first large, you are owning this is you, you've got a board you've got to report to, staff you have to manage, a budget you've got to control, all of the things. And that was just an incredible opportunity for me to really stretch and grow in my leadership in ways that I hadn't before. And I think along all of those pathways, something that I probably would have told myself is just, and something that we tell our participants at Cara, which is so serendipitous, is think outside the box, right? It's like think big, and then think outside the box, and also know the deepest truth of who you are, like that you can actually do this. And these are, again, those are both Cara Collective specific trainings that we provide and reinforcements, the values that we provide to our participants. And it's so relevant because when you really believe that and you internalize those, that's a game changer, right? And so if I were to think more broadly outside the box about what's possible and how I might impact the world, I might have been set on a different course earlier or sooner, etc. Right? And if I truly believed the deepest sense of who I was and had that agency and that belief in myself, I might have taken on leadership roles earlier and sooner, right? And so I think trusting myself from that perspective when I was younger to say, you got this, you can do it. You can do it, exactly. So I think that's probably the biggest piece of advice that I would give my younger self.
Oh, that's so cool. And I love all that experience that you just highlighted and how it aligns perfectly with the organization that you're currently running. So that sounds really amazing, actually. Sounds like really aligned in terms of purpose, too.
Exactly. And that's, I think it's the recognition that the things, as I mentioned, the things that gave me, I think, the most unease as a kid, right? Being Black, being a female, being tall, all of these things, right? That recognizing that those are physical attributes, but that they play a big role into forming who I was. And recognizing, if I could have told myself, you will be loved and respected and sought out because of all of because of all of this, that would have been huge to know when I was a kid, right? You have the X factor, you got it. And so I think that's a big piece. And one thing I would be remiss if I didn't say also, to just have more fun. I think there's a seriousness there too. Of course, I said as I like to joke and all of that, but just especially as I continue to evolve my professional career, give yourself more grace and have more fun. It's like that's what life is. The work is too hard already, so have more fun.
Oh my God, I totally get it. I forgot that for a second. Again, we're in Zoom, and so we're not in Zoom. We're in production podcast software, but we are virtually, and I can forget how tall you are, and so
Exactly.
I actually use I'm not as tall. I'm 5'10", so fairly tall, I would say.
Yep.
But I've used my height as a strength a lot of times,
Exactly.
especially in an office setting, where maybe like energy and bravado were the thing that would overpower a room, I would stand up.
I love that. That's exactly right.
And
That's exactly right.
that speaks for itself, you know what I mean? I didn't have to yell, I just have to stand up.
I I am thinking about this book that I read not too long ago called More Than Ready, and
Ooh,
it's by Cecilia Munoz,
okay.
who is amazing, and she served as the first Latina to lead the White House Domestic Policy Council, and she just basically this book is for the subtitle is "Be Strong and Be You" and other lessons for women of color on the rise.
Nice.
But just exactly what you said is so interesting because one of the things that she brings up in here is how she is smaller in stature and how she had to physically sometimes elbow her way
True.
into a space, because there'd be, tall people kind of surrounding in a physical closed circle, and she would have to push her way through to get and be part of the conversation. And it's an incredible visual to have, but it's also just it's literal and it's figurative, right? How often we've had to elbow our way into a conversation. So I love that you use that, and I might try to start standing up at meetings too when I'm in person.
It is a power move, I would say, especially coming from you. I will be like, oh my god, I better listen. It's not a bad thing. I would say it's like it's not a power move in a bad way. It's a power move in the sense of like, how are you attracting attention to yourself? Like how are you using your strengths to make sure that your message is conveyed, right?
Exactly.
And so I think like using all of you, including your physical appearance, if you have a strong voice, use your strong voice. If you have strong gesture, I always gesture. So use your gestures, right? Whatever that is. If you have a low voice, my dad, he used to get attention by speaking really low and making sure that people leaned in to listen to him and whatever he said, and speak so slow. It was mortifying. It was like you had to just lean in and just stop, right? But you had to stop and pay attention because there was no other way to do it. And he used that as his power move in most meetings. That's how he got people to listen.
That's amazing. That is amazing. And I love that, right? It's not always the louder voice trying to speak over other loud voices, but how are you being centered and deliberate and forcing people to literally and physically lean in? I love that.
Yeah, totally. Okay, believe it or not, we are. I think I think I got you a little bit over. Do you have a couple of minutes to wrap it up?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, great. Sorry I got you a little bit over, but okay, I have a few more questions for you just to wrap it up, and thank you so much for being on the podcast. I cannot thank you enough. It's been so much fun. Would you want to tell us what is one thing we don't know about you, maybe something fun or funny or a little story?
Something fun that folks do not know about me. I don't know if this is fun, but it's something that I always have been fascinated by is I love, 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 love languages. I speak probably 3 fairly fluently, and can speak, I can't even know how many others, at least a few words. I had friends from Israel who taught me to speak some Hebrew. I can sing the Israeli national Hebrew anthem. I can sing a nursery rhyme in Croatian. And to me, the reason, and it actually relates to what we were talking about because, I'm always seeking that connection, always seeking that connection to people. And I would have friends in high school or in college, who would say, oh, I know how to speak, Russian. And then they would say a bad word or an expletive word, and I'm like, how is that going to serve you? How about hello? How are you? I love you. You nice to meet you. Those are the words that I want to know. But so I can at least get to probably the first minute or two of a conversation in a dozen languages.
Wow, that is super impressive. I'm excited. I was gonna ask you what is a book you've gifted the most, but you already talked about More Than Ready. Do you want to leave it as is, or do you have a book that you feel even more passionate about?
Oh my goodness, there are so many books that I feel passionate about. For so many different reasons. One of the books that I recently finished was "I'm Still Here" by Austin Channing Brown. Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness, and that was just a powerful book for me to
Yes.
help situate some of the things that I'm feeling,
Yeah.
and have experienced in my professional life. But the book, if I'm technically answering your question, one of the books that I have gifted the most is actually, he's going to kill me for saying this, but my brother's book, and it's called Go Find Yourself. I won't say the other part of it. If people look for it, they'll find it. And it's the wisdom you need to get off of your booty and create your best self. And it's by Glenn Lutz. And that I've gifted, and it's more of a coffee table book, but it's got these great sort of isms that just remind you, like, yeah, you know this. This is who you are. You got this. Go be your best self. And so just sometimes flipping through one of those pages is phenomenal.
What is a book you would write?
Ooh. That is a great question. A book that I would write. I think a book that I would write is something along the lines of something that we hinted at a little bit earlier, which is, but also I would preface this by saying that Kimberly Crenshaw, the amazing Kimberly Crenshaw, has already kind of beat me to it through a TED Talk on intersectionality. But I think there's something around intersectionality, something around the variation and variety amongst Black people, and generally the Black women specifically, so that when you see one, don't assume that you've seen all, right? And so there's something along those lines that I would probably write that could include my own experiences.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure. I hope to see you soon again.
Thank you so much for having me, and keep doing what you're doing. This is amazing to elevate voices, and particularly those that are not speaking. So thank you so much, Marina.
Thanks.
Woo! There you have it. I hope you liked this episode, and please don't forget to share, like, comment on the podcast link. Tell all your networks and friends and family about it. Submit a recommendation for a guest at www.unboss.io. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Donate by clicking on the anchor link and help me continue to make great episodes. You can find all this information on www.unboss.io. See you next time. Oh, that was good.